My name's Stuart Stevens. That's Joe Trippi down there on the left, and we are extraordinarily fortunate to have Joyce Vance with us. Um, I could spend the next half hour talking about Joyce Vance. She really is. I know I'm
Please
going to
don't.
embarrass. I'm going to embarrass her now. Um, she really is a living American hero of what she has done on so many fronts. And there's really nobody, I think, that has more standing and experience to talk about the threat that uh, they this moment poses. So, Joyce, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
I'm glad to be
Um,
with y'all.
Yeah,
I first want to talk. You've got a book coming up that I think is one of the best titles. Giving up is unforgivable. A manual for keeping a democracy. I think it's one of the best titles I've come across in a long time, and it's coming out in October. Is that
It
right?
is. It
That's
is.
that's that's
I'm
fantastic.
that person that was foolish enough to decide to write a book about how to save a democracy in the middle of all of this.
Well, I guess there's always the danger to be completely irrelevant because
yeah. So
it'll be like
right,
Do
how we
not summon
lost the
that thought
democracy.
into existence. So, one
Um,
of the things that I'm committed to is the idea that we have to embody democracy if we want to hold on to it. So, no trash talk.
no trash talk. Um, Well, look, I just have to start out by asking you just kind of your reactions, and if you haven't subscribed to Joyce's Substack, you absolutely should. It's a must read in this moment. I just finished reading your latest piece on these threats to the judge and what it means. But can you just kind of give some context and speak to that of how you see this?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird thing to see the Chief Justice of the United States feel obligated to make yet again, because I've lost track of how many times he's done this during the two Trump administrations. I mean, this is probably three, four, five, and it's not something that Chief Justices do in normal presidencies, which this most definitely is not. But here, yet again, we have an attack on a judge for the terrible sin of issuing two temporary restraining orders. I mean, for those of you who aren't lawyers, let me just say temporary restraining orders don't resolve any substantive issues. It's just a super temporary 4 or 5 day pause, freezing the status quo in place so a judge can get briefs from the parties and start to decide the issues. And this is what Donald Trump and his buddies want to go to war over, is a federal judge freezing the status quo in place for a few days. I mean, that's sort of crazy. So Donald Trump did attack the judge in the case involving deportations on social media, and the Chief Justice fired back pretty quickly. And that surprised me a little bit. This was a
Hmm.
much quicker response from John Roberts than we've previously seen, reminding people that impeachment is not the remedy. If you disagree with the judge's decision, the remedy is to appeal that decision.
Yeah, it's putting
so
literally a target by posting his picture and all of this. And if you're comfortable with it, I just like to talk about your father-in-law was a judge who was assassinated for by a racist for his stance on civil rights in 1989. Um, my father was an attorney in Jackson, Mississippi at the time, and knew him, and it was one of these extraordinary moments. It's just impossible to forget, but it just brings home how real this is. Um,
Well, and especially with the threat coming from the president, right? There are three or four federal judges who've been assassinated, a few more who've been attacked, family members who've been killed. Until the Trump era, right, by dissatisfied litigants. So the idea that the attack is coming from inside of the House, so to speak, is really horrible. It reminds me of, we used to read a couple of decades ago about the judges in Latin America who were being
right.
assassinated by cartels. And it's this whole notion of killing the judges for administering justices that should be a real wake up call. I hope, frankly, for elected officials in the Republican Party, this should give them pause. I've said that a number of times and been disappointed. I hope I won't be this
Yeah.
time. But really, all of us collectively should be worried if the judiciary is under attack.
Yeah, Joe, you first encountered Joyce, I guess, when you were working in Alabama for that incredible Senate race. Was that the first time that you
Yeah,
had met?
both big fans of Doug Jones, who who
Doug's my former boss, actually. I worked for Doug when he was the U.S. attorney.
yeah, no, and it was an incredible. Obviously, the 2017 race was an incredible victory, in just in terms of it. And I, for one, and I don't know that Joyce can do this, but I would have rather seen him be our attorney general than Merrick Garland. But I know people in the law can't really get into that, no matter how much of
I'm
a
I'm a big fan of Jones. I mean, I think that was going to be a tough job no matter who took it. Jones is a great guy.
yeah. And but no, he I think embodies the best in Alabama and best in the people, and I think it's a big antidote to what's going on right now. But Joyce, what I was wondering is, it seems to me you're not the only person who said today on these as we launch Lincoln Square, that they were surprised that Roberts jumped in so quickly
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and strongly. And I was wondering, what do you think that signal? I mean, one, does it help other? I think it was sort of like, feels to me like almost a protective shield to tell other judges out there, hey, that you can say what you want to. I mean, I want to get your take on what that meant.
Yeah,
What he was signaling when he did that.
So, look, I don't know John Roberts, so I don't pretend to read his tea leaves with any accuracy. I mean, there's some possibilities. I was amused to see George Conway jump in and say,
right.
"Welcome to the resistance," right,
Right.
Mr. Chief Justice. I think that might be a little bit too much. I think what we're seeing, the Chief Justice's job constitutionally is to protect his branch of government, the judiciary. And he has been protective of judges when they have been attacked by the president in the past. He took issue with Trump when he said that there were, Obama judges and Trump judges and, whatever, Biden judges and Reagan
Right.
judges. He was critical of that. So this may be more of the same, a little bit more of a rapid response. Maybe he's learning a little bit from folks like you that you can't let the news cycle get away from you. I would like to read more into it. I would like to think that the court is concerned about this moment in democracy and is willing to step in and do its job, which, by the way, is not politics, right? I don't want to see politics out of the court. I don't expect them to take a side. I do expect them to uphold the law and stand rigorously for the Constitution. But like everybody else, they're going to have to make a believer out of me after what we've been through.
Yeah, just I was really struck being a Southerner and um, when Tom Cotton of Arkansas spoke out and attacked the judge. And I just thought it was so reminiscent. Go back to 1957, the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, uh, after Board versus Brown versus Board of Education. And the governor then of Arkansas called out the National Guard to block the integration. So what did the president of the United States do then? He sent in the 101st Airborne into Little Rock. And then he later federalized the National Guard. And he was able to use that powerful force, just as they did when they sent the National Guard to the University of Mississippi, 1962, um, to uphold the law. So here we are now, where it is the roles are almost reversed. The president is the one who is threatening to call out National Guard, and I just think that is such a I really don't know how to put it. Such a disturbing moment.
It seems to me that it's very important that we do just what you're doing. I mean, we're sort of going through the stages of grief, right? I mean, we're all in shock, we're in horror, we're in denial. Okay, we're whatever we are. Is this 8 weeks in? It feels like it's been a decade. I think it's that point in time where we have to acknowledge this isn't normal, it's not right. And the question is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. And where do you think this is going to head with uh, governors' roles and these state attorney generals? Um, is it crazy to think that state attorney generals are going to be filing action, say, some sort of consumer protection action or something against what Elon Musk is doing or Social Security, um, and that they're going to be able to try to hold the line here?
There have been successes in the courts. There was, for instance, today, the USAID case where a judge entered a preliminary injunction
Right.
saying that Doge has to get out of USAID while that litigation goes forward. That doesn't involve the state's attorneys general who are litigating primarily in groups. They launched one of the early challenges to Trump's efforts to undo birthright citizenship. They've been successful with that. They have worked together incredibly effectively as a group. And it's not unusual for states' attorneys general to
Hmm.
band together by political stripe or other affinity group and launch litigation. But I think we're seeing it happen in a very deliberate, consolidated way. And something I've noted about the cases that they're doing, and I'm a huge fan of some of these folks. Peter
Yeah.
Nerona, the Attorney General in Rhode Island, is one of my former U.S. attorney colleagues. I know a number of them. I think that they're tremendous lawyers. Somehow or another, we ended up with the blessing of attorneys generals who know how to litigate and get stuff done in this moment. And so they're not just jumping at anything, right? They are not filing chump change cases. They are waiting for the right cases. They are making sure that they have the right parties. And I'm very impressed with what they're doing. On the other hand, we have, and look, I hate for everything to be about politics. I live in Alabama. If I didn't have Republican friends, I wouldn't have any friends at all.
Right.
um one of my best friends is in your state, my law school roommate, and she is most certainly not a Democrat, if you're listening, Jane. But so I would just say it's discouraging to me, frankly, when you see Republican attorneys general who aren't willing to stand up for their constituents, some of whom were in the Great Hall of Justice when Trump spoke last week. And as lawyers, it is astonishing to me that they sat there through that and did not get up and walk out. As the president said some truly outrageous things about using the justice system for personal revenge.
Why didn't that happen? What?
That's the question of our age, right? I mean, why didn't the Republican Party stand up and walk out long ago? I mean, how have we suddenly become a country where the Republican Party is pro Putin? Just where it's just so many things that boggle the mind.
I know, look, as you know, in 2016, there were a lot of people wrong about Donald Trump. It's really hard to find someone more wrong than me. I didn't think he'd win the primary or the general. And when he did, as someone who had helped elect tons of Republicans, including former governor of Alabama, um, I had to ask myself, how come I didn't see this? Why is it? And that led me to write this book, It Was All a Lie. And, the conclusion I came to was that there had always been these two strands of the Republican Party in post-World War II era. An Eisenhower strand, boring, governing, sane, and a Joe McCarthy strand. Conspiratorial, xenophobic, often racist, non-governing. And I think, I was part of this, Bush crowd that we aspired to the idea of compassionate conservatism. And I think, literally, like I and your friend Nicole Wallace and Matthew Dowd and all of us, we used to literally sit in the same room. And we've all came to the same position very quickly on Trump without talking about it. But I think it's safe to say that we thought our side of it we were the dominant gene, and
Hmm.
that the party, if only out of necessity because the country was changing so fast. I mean, if you remember, the chairman of the party, Ken Mellman, in 2005, gave a speech at the NAACP apologizing for the Southern strategy. that was the future. And I don't know any conclusion, honestly, to come to except that was wrong. We were the recessive gene. And that the party now is what the party really wanted to be, and Trump has given them permission to be that.
That's such a painful sort of a conclusion to reach, because I think as Americans, we're all decent people, right? I mean, I know people down here who would give somebody the shirt off their back,
Yeah,
quite literally,
Yeah.
and who in their personal life have friends who are black or gay or trans or Palestinian, but who somehow have just been suckered into this cruelty, this meanness, this lack of kindness that maybe it's who some, portion of the country has always been, but it is not who we should be. And I think we're at a moment where we need to fight to reject that sort of a view of a future for this country.
Well, there's nothing conservative about it. Nothing. I mean, that's what's so. It's not a
so true.
left-right thing. It's just amazing how he's gotten a whole bunch of Americans to be literally so un-American and so not conservative in the name of conservative. Using the conservative banner and the imagery of the flag and everything that the shift is just unbelievable to me. But Joyce, I agree. I mean, we have to at this point. It's like put as much sand in the gears as possible. Fight at every
Mhm.
corner. Get as many voices out there. People are saying, "Well, Bernie's saying this," or Adam Kinzinger saying that. What's fascinating to me is how do you get Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and Bernie Sanders and everybody in between on the same side? Well, it's simple. It's it's pro democracy. That's what we have to fight for, and to get everybody engaged in that fight and raising their voices against what Trump and his administration are doing.
It's hard because I thought, and obviously I'm not a political person like y'all are, but I really did think that the issue of democracy would have had more traction in the last election than it did. And what I've come to understand is, people have lives, they've got jobs, they've got kids. They're not following this stuff like we are.
Right.
They're not reading Project
Hmm.
2025. I mean, I find virtually nothing that Trump has done to be surprising because it's all written out in
Yeah.
Project 2025. And despite his efforts to distance himself from it during the campaign, if you were following along, and I wrote about this, so I know that folks who read my Substack are well aware, Donald Trump, there was no water between him and the views in Project 2025.
Yeah.
But look, for average, everyday folks, we've got to do a better job in this country of creating a culture of civics and politics where it's fun and interesting. Because I'm sure y'all are having the experience. I've had it a lot. I have good friends, people who are smart people who care about democracy, and they're just like, oh, I just don't want to think about it. It's just so terrible. I'm just going to unplug. And I, at first, I tried to have conversations with them, and now sometimes I just want to sort of like bang my head into the wall because those are really the people that, in many ways, have condemned us to where we are.
Well, I mean, that doesn't this go to your book? I mean, again, I
Sort
go
of
back to
does.
this title: "Giving Up is Unforgivable: Manual for Keeping a Democracy." I mean, it seems like that would speak directly to that.
I think that that's the whole point, right? We've come to take democracy for granted. And so I've
Hmm.
been having this fascinating conversation with the youngest of Bob's and my four kids. He's a college senior. And it's like, I keep saying, Ollie, what would it take to get you to read a book about saving democracy? And he's like, dude, I'm just not interested. It's like, well, why aren't you interested? You're like pretty liberal. You're a good kid. And he's like, well, yeah, but why should my generation have to do it? What I finally realized is the assumption that democracy exists and will continue to exist is so built in, they can't contemplate
Yeah.
that it would disappear
Yeah.
and that their lives would radically change. I think that's what we have to do. We have to get people to think about and value and fight for democracy.
Yeah, I think this is where the whole concept, reality, assumption of American exceptionalism bites us in the ass. That what's
Yeah.
happening in Hungary could never happen here. Um,
Yeah.
and
It's
there's just
happening here.
there's
I mean,
just no
Trump is using
reason.
Hungary as the model at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what's the difference between Hungary and the United States? I mean, the head of Hungary isn't talking about invading Poland, as opposed to the president of the United States talking about invading Canada. Um, it's just amazing. Well,
Crazy.
look, yeah, well, go ahead, Joe.
No, no, I was going to say that right now there's a strong case that we're headed toward, between Poland and Hungary, in the sense that in Poland a
Yeah.
strong uh, opposition developed and unified, and has been struggling but winning the fight to maintain democracy, in Poland and in Hungary. The opposition sort of fragmented, never really, so stunned, and unable to fight back, that 5 elections later, Orban is pretty much, a dictator and doing what he's doing. And,
Yeah.
and Trump is pretty much carrying out the same, playing all the cards the same way that Orban had. Her book is so important for people to get and, to internalize, because we've got to, into what's going on.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I think that, by the way, that political
Joyce,
choice that you offer between Poland and Hungary is so incredibly important. We should choose to be Poland, not Hungary, right? And in Hungary,
right.
what happened there was the diminution of the press, where they really destroyed the free press
Mhm.
as one of the first steps, and destroyed the legal system, sort of captured the lawyers who would be friendly and pushed away the ones who wouldn't be. So there's a cautionary tale for us.
and if anybody here hasn't read Anne Applebaum's Twilight of Democracy, which I hand out to random strangers like watchtowers at airports,
Great book.
it really goes into the history of that. And Anne is obviously American, but she lives in Poland, is married to the former Polish Minister of Defense, and has seen this firsthand. Well, Joyce, listen, we just want to thank you so much for doing this. Everybody, if you're not reading Joyce Vance's Substack, you're really missing one of the most important, interesting voices. What I find really interesting about reading your stuff, not to embarrass you here, is I, I can't predict what you're going to say, what your take is going to be on it, and I find that is such a pleasure to read, and always come away feeling smarter. And everybody out there should order her book. You can pre-order books, and that's a huge thing in the weird book world today, how pre-orders go. Giving Up is Unforgivable, a manual for keeping democracy. It's published by Random House, is that
Penguin
correct?
Random House,
Kingdom
yes.
Random House. So when you get off this, go and pre-order it. And thank you again, Joyce, and thank everybody here. And subscribe to Lincoln Square. We're trying to do what we can. Um, I think the greatest danger is to think that someone else is going to save us, and that somebody else is just us. So thank you, and talk to you soon.
Thank you all. Enjoyed being with you.
Thank you, George.